Good evening, members, and a warm welcome to our visitors and the officers present in this evening, and I hope we all have a good meeting. Welcome to this district planning meeting held on this day of the 13th of July 22. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting has been streamed live and recorded and will be capable of viewing as such by third parties. If you're seated in certain areas of this chamber, this broadcast may capture your image and may be capable of being broadcasting. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you may wish to leave this meeting. If you wish to stay, you're agreeing to be recorded, and as such, I'm Bruce Shubner, the chairman of this district planning committee. During this meeting, members, please put your hand up, and if you wish to speak, I will invite you at the appropriate time. Please note that this meeting is being streamed and the sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones. Therefore, when you're invited to speak, please remember to turn on your microphone and refer to the page and the paragraph on the agenda papers, and keep your contributions as clear and concise, and please remember to turn your microphone off when you've finished. Finally, can I remind members of the different levels and the notices in this chamber and draw your attention to the fire exit, which is the door on my left. Tara, may I have the apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Bell, Councillor Durham, Councillor Hurd, Councillor Lagan, Councillor Shorty, and Councillor Mrs. Dilks. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Channer, Chairman.
Councillor Channer, did you get that? Tara?
Yes, Chairman, I've got that. Thank you very much.
It is recommended that minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of April 22, found on pages 7 to 14, are approved as a true, accurate record. Agreed? So, declarance of your interest to declare your existence and nature of disciplinary peculiarity interests and peculiarity interests and non-peculiarity interests relating to items on the business and the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they became aware should they arise throughout the meeting. We now move to agenda 5. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. A non-pecuniary to declare as a member of Essex County Council who are statutory consultees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. A member of Essex County Council who is statutory consultees, non-pecuniary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, we now move to the agenda. Which is 22-20261 FUL, whole farmland at Hazeleigh Hall Lane on pages 15 to 68.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a full planning application that seeks the for a solar farm that relates to the construction and operation phase and also any associated infrastructure and landscaping. The solar farm would generate approximately 25 megawatts of electricity, which would power around 8,000 homes. It's proposed to operate for a period of 40 years, and then after that, the site will be returned to its current condition. The construction phase for the development would last approximately 16 weeks, and once complete, the site would be operational without the needs being manned. The visits to the site would be limited with a maximum of 4 cars or vans per week. The proposal, although it is a major development and on a strategic scale, it actually seeks very little operational development. So I'll take you through the proposals. So here we have the location plan. So access is taken from the A414 to the north of the site. You may be familiar with Wood and Mortimer, I think it's preschool. And then along past the South Malden Garden suburb boundary and through the Hazeleigh Hall tree belt. So the proposal has been put forward under something called the Rochdale Principle, which is something adopted for renewable energy developments, and it basically allows for greater flexibility in bringing forward the development. So what you have is development zones. So rather than approving, if the application is to be approved, a layout at this stage, you have these development zones. So for instance, development zone 1 will have the inverters, the substations, and then some solar panels, and then development zones 2 and 3 will have solar panels and inverters. So we have an indicative site layout based on the information that I've just given. So you can see that there's solar panels running in a east to westerly direction with inverters running through, inverters being positioned at different parts through the site. And the substations to be within the northern parcel of the site, and there'll be perimeter fencing with CCTV, which is shown, the CCTV points are shown by the black dots on the plan. This is the landscaping plan, so it's proposed to have native hedgerow planting along the perimeter of the public footpaths and with seed planting in between. There's a native tree belt proposed along the southern part of the westerly boundary down here, and along the southern boundary also. There's a 15-metre buffer between the woodland and the solar panels. There won't be any lighting on the site, and the site will be planted with a combination of pasture mixed grassland, wildflower meadow, which includes the land underneath the solar panels. So here we have the elevations of the fencing. So there'll be timber posts with wire mesh fencing with mammal gates to allow mammals to cross through the site. These are the inverter plans, so there'll be 9 of those, as I said before, through the centre part of the site. This is the customer substation, only to be used where site visits to the site are necessary, and that will be along with the other structures on the site on a hardcore base. The network operator substation. So these are cross sections of the panels. So the panels have actually been put forward on a worst case scenario. So they've been shown to be at a height of 2.8 metres, but in reality, they could be around more like 2.5 metres in height, and they'll be 0.9 metres from the ground. They'll be in rows with a 3 to 4 metre gap between them, installed on spike foundations. So here's some photographs of the site. So this is walking from the site, so looking back towards the preschool and the South Malden Garden suburb, and then looking towards the site through the ancient woodland. So more photos of the north of the site. You can see the Maldenwick local wildlife site, the ancient woodland, and there's just the land is sort of undulating, so you can just see the higher land in the western part of the site and towards the centre. So the first photograph is taken from within the public footpath. You can see Hazeleigh Hall Wood again, the public right of way in the bottom left, your left, and the approximate location of Hazeleigh Hall, which is a listed building, and then Maldenwick. So this is just would make this slightly bigger just so you could see the viewpoint of Bradwell, but this is from the southern part of the site, from one of the higher points within the site, but the site is screened largely by the existing vegetation. And some more photos of the southern part of the site. So you can see the listed building. The impact would be greatest from the public footpath from within the site rather than the longer views. but they would be reduced by the 15th year when the vegetation matures. And you can see that views of the listed building and then from the listed building are limited, so the harm from that would be very limited. And there's just some views from Hazeleigh Hall just to show that the site is just behind the hedgerow, so given the height of the solar panels, it's unlikely that they'd be seen from ground level from there. So a member's update was circulated with a response from Chelmsford City Council, and there was also an update to the Skylark condition, just correcting a typographical error to show that only 8 Skylark plots were required rather than 12. And there was also just advising of some supporting information that was received from the applicant, which didn't raise any new material considerations. It's noted that the development would cause some adverse impacts on the landscape and nearby heritage assets. They would be reduced to minor moderate at the 15th year though, and the development is only proposed for a 40-year period where the land would be put back to its original condition. And so the landscape impacts would be minimised to an acceptable degree subject to conditions, and the heritage impacts would be minor enough that the benefits of the development would outweigh those harms. The impacts on the public right-of-way would be limited to the construction phase. They could be controlled through condition and largely through the use of banksmen to ensure the safety of people that are using those. Likewise, the ecological impacts can be mitigated through the use of conditions, and the development would actually provide a net biodiversity gain. The benefits of the scheme would be that it provides a provision of renewable energy, which is supported by a Maldon policy and also the National Planning Policy Framework, which does weigh heavily in favour of the proposal. So in balancing the benefits against the adverse impacts, and given the temporary nature of those impacts, also the ability to impose conditions to mitigate them, it's considered that the benefits outweigh the harm, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
We now have Mr. Hazeleigh Bond, who's the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay,
Okay,
you go.
thank you. Firstly, I'd like to commend your officer on her thorough and considered report. We're grateful to receive a positive recommendation, and we feel that's testimony to the following: a rigorous assessment of our application by officers and statutory consultees, paired with a diligent approach to finding solutions to technical issues as they arose, a considered approach to site selection, maximising the use of existing vegetation. Consequently, there are no objections from technical consultees. We've also worked with local residents to attempt to mitigate any concerns. And perhaps most significantly for us, during the public consultation, we received over 200 responses from the public, with over 84% being positive. By some margin, this is the best supported proposal we have experienced in 30 or so other projects. Aside from generating enough clean energy to power 9,900 homes, or 35% of the borough's homes, plus the biodiversity net gain you've heard about, I'd like to turn our attention to why the proposal really matters. We're currently fighting a climate crisis and an energy security crisis at the same time. People are really feeling the impact of the rise of energy costs, which is largely caused by volatility in wholesale gas prices. We've little control over this, as the supply and price is largely determined by foreign entities, as can be seen right now. In April, the Energy Security Strategy was published. It called for a 5-fold increase in solar deployment by 2035, or an increase of 56 gigawatts. The current split of ground to rooftop is broadly 50-50, and if that ratio continues, we would still need around another 950 equivalent sized sites as this one nationally. That's in addition to all of the planned increases in wind and nuclear deployment. Councillors, you have before you today a well-received project with officer and consultee support, and that can make a huge difference to the climate and energy security crises. I urge you to support your officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hazeleigh Bond. Okay, councillors. Councillor Edwards? Yes, there we are.
Thank you. I have three questions, if I may. First of all, I pay number 5.4.2. At the very bottom of that paragraph, it says, however, there are potential noise impacts resulting from the development. Can I ask, or to clarify the noise assessment, is the noise continuous? Is it just for the development itself? Thank you. That's my first question. My second question is, this is an unmanned site, or will be. Will there be any sort of security afterwards? Because there's a lot of expensive equipment there. Just wonder about security aspect. And thirdly, how is the power diverted to the main power? I mean, there's no pylons being built, so presumably it's underground or part hits the grid. So that's my third question. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chairman. So in terms of the noise, in the report we were saying that there could be potential from this type of development. However, a noise impact assessment was submitted, and at 5.53, the sort of map's been provided that shows the potential sensitive noise receptors from the development. The noise impact assessment, though, did find that it's likely that the experience in noise will only be 0.1 decibels greater during the day and 0.5 during night if the solar farm was fully operational. But the noise assessment does state that it's unlikely that it would be within the unlikely that it would need to be operational during the night, and that it would fall within the no observed adverse effects level. So there wasn't any concerns raised, and Environmental Health didn't recommend any conditions in that respect. In terms of the security, just row back to the site plan. So you can see the fencing will be essentially security fencing as well, and there's CCTV on each of the black points that you can see on the site. So I believe that's how it's to be managed. And then in terms of the power, you can see the electric cable is the green line, and the indicative cable route is the red line. Appreciate it's hard to see on the screen, but it follows I believe it runs out here. It's hard to see, but yeah, it will be route cables rather than pylons.
Jim, just for point of clarity, one of the assessment criteria for developers when they actually looked, obviously being forward sites like this, is their ability to actually easily and effectively join into the power network. So quite often, yeah, so there is obviously, if they have to do a lot of external work, obviously that puts up costs and difficulties. That's actually one of their site criteria. So yeah, quite often you don't actually see any physical works on that. Thanks.
You've done.
Councillor Stilts. No. Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, Councillor Stilts wears a dress.
Yes, I know she does.
So I'm a gay man, but I don't wear a dress. On the cable thing though, so we see that coming from the site. Where does that actually join the national grid? So where does that cable go to? And where will be, so there'll need to be a substation somewhere that then connects that into the national grid. So I know when we had a few years ago, there was a proposal in Tottenham for a solar power farm. And I think that went miles to Tiptree before it actually connected into the national grid. So is this cable going to go miles before it's connected into the national grid?
Dear Chairman, the applicant hasn't submitted anything in relation to any external work outside of this site, and as I was saying, quite often, you know, the part of the process is actually for the site allocation is the ability to join the national grid basically within the site, either through cabling under the ground or through existing pylons going through. I don't know if Sana can give it, but there is no application for that. That isn't part of this application, and that would need permission outside of this. So we are only assessing what we've got in front of us, but yeah.
So we could approve this, and then we could have a separate application about how it's going to join the national grid. Yeah, in terms of and how the cabling might be dug, the impact on that, where the nearest pylon is, all those sorts of things. So we're only really getting half an application here.
The chair, as I was saying, quite often in these instances, the applications join on the site. There is, that is, we have the information that we have in front of us. It's quite common practice for them to join within the site. As Ms. Hearn said, there is some work proposed within the site. They haven't suggested.
Yeah. No, yes.
Check,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. Sorry, just a point of clarity. The design and access statement does state that the grid connection point would be underground at a prescribed depth, meaning that there would be no requirement for overground cabling and or additional pylons, and there would be no visual impact associated with this approach.
So something needs to be dug. So something needs to be dug to this site. Yeah, I just need clarity. Is there a national grid point?
Through you, Chairman. We only got, and I said it's common practice now to be locating sites that are able to join the grid at the site. There is nothing, we have what we've got. We've read out the information. There is nothing about a separate level of development. The requirement, obviously, in relation to development, is if it's not functional, it has to be removed. So I think it'd be very unlikely they'd build it and then not be able to undertake the works and implement it, because it has to be removed. If you look at one of the conditions, as soon as it's not inactive, but we are assessing the application in front of us. Thank you, Chairman.
Are you happy, Mr. Siddle? Yes, thank you. Councillor Siddle, yes. Who's next? Who's next? Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was pleased to note that at 5.3.6 and 5.3.7 that the archaeology of the site is mentioned, and a decent assessment that it could potentially be medieval and Roman and Saxon. Can I be assured that this is not going to be a desktop exercise and that there will actually be field work undertaken and there will be a full watching brief on site, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So there are conditions, just trying to find out which number they are, that have been recommended by the Historic Environment Officer at Essex County Council to deal with the archaeology at the site. I believe that they're full archaeological conditions.
Yes, through you, Chair, I've read the report and I noticed that, but it doesn't make it clear whether it's on-site assessment or whether it's a desktop exercise. And there are far too many of these desktop exercises taking place in terms of the loss of our historic environment. And I would like to propose, if this is recommended for approval, if it is, that there would be a full archaeological condition which would involve on-site assessment. Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, can I just comment? Obviously, if you actually look at condition 6, it requires an assessment to be undertaken. So that would actually then, you're almost making the condition you're suggesting is actually almost making the assumption there definitely will be something there of that level and degree. The condition we've got at 6 requires some level of assessment, and that will need to be approved by the LPA. And then obviously there's the subsequent one, and then obviously about the investigation of how they'll be undertaking that. So to a certain extent, I think we've got that covered already within the standard conditions that we use, because they are standard conditions and they cover those matters. Thank you, Chairman.
Grateful to Mr. Lee for that, but would still like that as a condition. Thank you.
And Councillor Majors next. Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If members have read the report, on page 18, there's an indicative red line, which is where the power goes out. So we've been asking where it goes, but it's in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. The report refers to skylark mitigation, which is great. Skylark mitigation plots. In the application, it refers to golden plover as well. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I don't know anything about them, but they're not mentioned at all in the report. So I'd like to understand why not, and whether the mitigation for skylarks will suit plover as well. Hedgehogs are mentioned in the place services response, but not mentioned in the report. It does say something about the reptile measures would be appropriate for hedgehogs, but it doesn't actually condition in the report that hedgehogs need to be dealt with in any way. The ecology report finds that the hedgerow biodiversity net gain will be about 25%, but could be as much as 114%. And I don't think that's been conditioned. And it seems if we've got the opportunity to make a net gain of 114%, can we go for that, please? I'd like to understand what will happen in 2065. So if the equipment is redundant and the field's got to go back to how it was, that's fine. But I'd just like to understand whether there's a potential for it to be extended. Would that be a full-blown planning application all over again or whatever? I'd like to understand the planting, when it will take place, because if this is only going to last 40 years, and the planting won't really be good and thick until 15 years in, that doesn't, really those seeds need to get in the ground now, or saplings. And finally, I would question if CCTV on its own is adequate, because somebody puts on a bike helmet or a hoodie and great, we've got them on CCTV, but we've no idea who they were. So I'm a bit worried about that security. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the plovers, the report considers the birds, and it was found that the site wasn't functionally linked land, so it wouldn't be considered that there would be concerns over those birds being within the site. Hedgehogs, I believe that the mammal fencing will allow them to migrate across the site, and that any mitigation that's included within any of the ecological reports that have been submitted, including the addendums and the reptile ones, also are conditioned within the sites. Any mitigation in relation to those, or I think there was another concern had in relation to species, but that would be, any mitigation would be delivered through that condition that secures all the mitigation that's been suggested through those reports. And Ms. Lee just reminded me that the skylark condition as well, it's because the skylark mitigation needs to take place off-site, so we need what we call a gramping condition to be able to secure those meshes off-site rather than in the site. That's why it's got its own bespoke condition on its own. In terms of after 40 years, there's a condition proposed that says that after the 40-year period, the site will need to be put back into its current condition, or if the site isn't used or functioning for a period of 6 months, then that also comes into place. The thing is, because the technology is only built or to function for that period of time, so any proposal to extend that would likely result in a new application and the consideration of new equipment. And it's my understanding that the planting is to come forward, the landscaping to come forward before the operation of the first operation of the development, to ensure that it's in place and mitigating from the beginning.
Councillor Spenceley?
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Can I just come back, please? So there's a couple of questions missed, but when you said it's your understanding that the planting will be early doors, is that a condition, please? Because I think it should be. And my other two questions were about the biodiversity and if it could be at 114% rather than 25%, and whether the CCTV is really the best security we can get, because if we're really reliant on this and someone comes in and, I don't know, chucks a brick on a glass power panel, I don't know what happens because it's not my industry. It will smash, yeah, it will shatter. But I feel CCTV just isn't quite enough. Thank you.
So in relation to security, just reading, so yeah, it's relating to the stop-proof fencing along the edges of the site. And then there would also be the vegetation at the exterior along the public footpaths, which would make it difficult for people to get into the site. But I note your comments in relation to that. There's also, the cameras will be infrared to provide monitoring 24/7 during dark hours as well. But yeah, I believe that is the security that is proposed at the site.
Through Chair, just clarity on those three queries. The condition 3 requires that the landscaping will be imposed in the first available planting season after the work has been first available planting season following first operation. Obviously, you need to be conscious that obviously, if we were to put the planting and landscaping in, it's quite possible that the building works and development could damage that. So it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to have them in place prior to them being in place. So, and obviously, because of seasonal work, we always require it done in the first planting season after that. So that's just a fairly standard condition and isn't particularly onerous or unusual. Similarly, low, I would say also with the relationship to comments on the security, to a certain extent, that's not really a matter for us as decision makers on this. You know, it's standard practice for their industry to have unmanned solar farms and to have this as their security. If there's damage to the equipment, if it's damage to the plant, vandalism, etc., that's their prerogative. It'd be no different to saying we would want certain conditions on a restaurant if it was to open in case they were burgled or anything. You know, that's not a material consideration for the planning system. In relation to the net, it's a very hot evening. I think I can take my jacket off. Is that okay? Yeah. Sorry. I think we all know that's not likely. Sorry. In relation to the biodiversity and net gain, obviously what they're stating is an aspirational at the highest level we potentially could get. It would be unreasonable, in my personal professional opinion, to expect a condition to require that level, particularly as the fact that while there is some gain in this aspect, there is no policy or government guidance saying we require this to make a solar farm acceptable. So although we may have it as a benefit, it's not a consideration that is resulting in us recommending approval. So while it must say maybe something that's aspirational and it's, for want of a better phrase, planning gain from the development, it isn't something that I think we could ever require. And I think if we were to impose that, it would be unreasonable. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Chairman. So a few of my questions have already been asked and answered. No, that's great. That's really good with regard to the wildlife. Something that I'd always say, which might sound petty, but actually I think is quite important, is when you talk about native plantings, is to make sure that they're actually native to this part of the country, because we never discussed that. Native, if they're just UK native trees, some of them could actually be quite harmful to the local ecology. I've got one quick question with regard to the ecological conditions, because I think this is, from everything I've read here and heard tonight, this is a really important application which I'm really minded to support. But I'd just like to know how the ecological conditions will be monitored, as particularly with regard to, for example, the skylarks. As I'm sure that Mr. Lee will be aware, skylarks have been quite a contentious matter on another application, a development that's in my own area. So there's that. The other thing I'd like to say, and I'd just like to note it really, you know, I think the report's fantastic because it does address, and answering questions tonight have addressed a lot of those concerns regarding the ecology. However, how disappointing it really is that we've got Essex Wildlife Trust here with Morden Wick bordering this development proposal. The Forestry Commission and the RSPB have all failed to respond as consultees, and how wonderful it would be to have their backing and the knowledge that they could share with us about what they think of all these mitigations. So I think it's such a shame that we don't have that, but it is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to answer your question in terms of the skylight mitigation and the enforceability of the condition, fortunately we don't have compliance officers to go out and check, so it is sort of a reactive process, but if it is something that the council are made aware of, then it's something that we would enforce against.
Councillor Bill before Councillor Swain. Yes.
Yeah, I'm really going along the road of benefit to the actual planning authority, which is us. If we're talking 9,900 houses, that's more than going to cover Heybridge, Malden, and probably a bit of the surrounding area as well. Does all of this power just go into the grid and we don't get any say where it's used? Or are we actually going to get any benefit from it?
Through you, Chairman. To a certain extent, it goes into the grid and it's just used. But obviously, further it travels within the grid, there's a reduction in the volume. And obviously, if it's pumped into our area, it'll be the houses in our area that will be drawing down on it first. But it doesn't quite work out as in like it's a discounted rate or anything like that. No, but thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hull.
Making a difference. It's very good that you're talking about bridleways in here, 5.55. But could you just point out where the nearest bridleway is? Because it's otherwise we're missing one. Or I have ridden around there, but not.
Yeah, so I believe it is shown. So it joins in with the public footpath along here, I believe. So this is your joint footpath and bridleway.
Is this a new one? Because it would be. Are they adding an extra bridleway? Because we're very grateful if they are.
There's no proposal for any additional. Let me just.
We wouldn't mind.
Plans because I can't see with my eyes that far away. No, it's not additional. No.
Are you happy?
Well, no, I just can't. I don't think that's where bridleways is. If it's a footpath, we don't go along there. It's not. Perhaps you could come back to me on it if it's not. Would you come back to me?
Wasn't the horse inside?
What?
Yes, by the way, we've seen that. We can't find that doesn't tally with that.
It doesn't. No, we've tried to work it out.
Spa Lane and there does not tally with. That's not Spa Lane.
Must head come back, Chairman.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah. So it was my understanding that the public footpath through the site was actually a bridleway, but it's not shown on here. So I can't be certain. But based on the comments from the Bridleway Association, and that was my understanding. But so there is one within the vicinity of the site based on their comments.
Could be a byway then.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine's just a query, really. Under 7.3, which is the internal consultees, I'm really surprised that they've got no objection to this, although they say it will harm the listed buildings, and you will see it in the long view from listed buildings. Bearing in mind, if anybody puts a planning application in, you can't do anything next to a listed building because of the effect on the countryside. And I think we had that recently with an Atcos building that was a planning application in Tollsbury or Tolleston Knights, one of those. And they were horrified about the effect of taking down an asbestos barn, of the effect it would have on a listed building. So I just wanted to know why this wasn't seen as a problem when you can see it from the building itself and from the distance. I mean, generally I'm pro solar farms because I've got an electric car. I'm pro solar, but I am concerned about the effect on the listed buildings and why it's not considered to be a problem. And the other thing is, while I'm here, there's another point. These roads are really tiny going up past Church House Farm, which is a very busy livery yard. One, how are you going to manage the deliveries and the horses? And secondly, those branches overhang. Are all the lorry drivers going to be prosecuted if they break a branch? Or how's that going to be managed?
Thank you. So in terms of the listed building, and based on the comments from the Conservation Officer also, the views from the building would be limited, and the degree of harm was found to be less than substantial. And then it would be filtered by vegetation from the site as well. So there would be a very minor degree of harm that would be considered to be outweighed by the public benefits. So this development's on a larger scale and has different considerations to other proposals that relate to works to a listed building. And then the deliveries through the site are to come from the A414 to the north of the site. There's nothing within the agricultural report to suggest that there'll be any damage to the trees as a result of that, and there will be tree protection measures in place during the construction phase.
If I might come back, how are we going to manage the lorry deliveries with the horses that reside at that farm? Because that's a little tiny lane. That's a really, really, really small lane, whichever direction you come from. And I just wondered what the mitigation for it was, because you can't let these massive big lorries trundle past horses. Something needs to be sorted. And it's not because I'm not supportive of wind farms, but I know I'd be horrified if I was on a horse and met a whole load of great big lorries.
Yeah, it is a roadway, and so we can't prevent lorries from using the roadway, and it isn't something that we could refuse the application on, I don't believe. Or
has it not got a weight limit on it?
Not that I'm aware of, but that would be something that, I don't think that would be part of the planning application consideration.
Okay, Councillor White. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of points. Oddly enough, in relation to Councillor Beale's comment about where the electricity will go, I believe there are moves, perhaps coming from National Grid, that local areas should benefit if they accept renewable energy developments locally. So that may be something to look out for in the future. As far as the grid connection is concerned, and Mr. Lee says that's obviously not relevant to this, I did understand it was almost adjacent to this development. If I might refer back to Councillor Nunn's point about archaeological assessments, it isn't adequate to say an assessment, because there are assessments and assessments. I think one would at least like to see a ground radar, geophysical, run over the area to identify whether there is anything significant there. And a desktop survey is never adequate. I mean, we've had this with the Bradwell B idea, and tried to get, and obviously there they would do some trial pits and so on. But for development like this, it would seem fairly easy and not expensive to run a geophysical radar over the surface of the ground. As far as the footpaths are concerned, as I understand it, they're all going to have 2 metre high fences on both sides. This is what people will walk through, and vegetation, hedges to be planted as well, presumably on the outside of these fences. So I hope the actual total width is going to be adequate for all that. As has been mentioned, it's unfortunate that people like the Essex Wildlife Trust haven't responded, and I don't know whether the glare from these arrays would have an impact on birds, right? Since it's right adjacent to the Wick Reserve, and also I don't know whether, since we don't quite know the proximity of the bridleway, or whether that path through it is a bridleway, whether glare from the panels might have an effect on horses travelling through there. My last point is, it seems to me like this replacement skylark plots is just a matter of words. I don't know how you actually would achieve it. I agree there's no question of monitoring it, but it seems to me just a very unlikely proposition to try and meet a problem. But to go back to my point about, I would endorse Councillor Nunn's amendment to include a more thorough assessment than a desktop one, preferably using ground survey, ground radar.
Just to remind members, we have got a proposal by Councillor Nunn at the moment, but do you want to answer that? No, there wasn't really. Like the glare and all that, isn't it?
Yeah, just for points on clarity then, in terms of the glint and glare, the application has been supported by information to state that the panels themselves are going to be of an anti-glare design, and then the metal will be painted with anti-glare paint to stop any negative impacts in that sense. In terms of the hedgerows in the public right-of-way, the public right-of-way officer has been consulted on the proposals and are content that there will be sufficient space within the public right-of-way for people to move within and across the site. And there's guidance within the national planning guidance about how to move skylarks, and it appears to be, I won't pretend that I'm an expert, but it seems to be quite a simple process of just making sure that they're not within any near any train lines, anything like that, and away from predators. And then it's simple of just leaving unsown plots during the sowing season to make sure that they have an area free from vegetation to go within. I believe that was it, but let me know if that hasn't answered your points.
Yes.
Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of questions and sort of an observation. My main question actually revolves around the need for an environmental impact assessment, which actually would probably answer a lot of the questions that have taken place. Under Schedule 2, which this falls under, I'm not entirely sure why we haven't asked for an EIA. I read in 3.1.13 that the LPA had issued a screening opinion. I don't know what that is. I don't know when that was done or what form it took. So I'd like a little bit more clarity on that. Not quite understanding what you're meaning by impact on ecology and is not functionally linked. It's all linked. It's all linked. All wildlife is linked and has to be linked in order to be sustainable. So we have to make sure that it is linked. At 5.6, you talk about the impact on ecology, and you're saying it's not functionally linked. Again, what do you mean by that? Observations. How do we know where where mammals cross? We're putting in little. Are we putting signposts? Sorry to be obtuse here. However, the best of my knowledge, they don't go where you want them to go or where you think they're going to go. They have little minds of their own, whether they're weasels, stoats, or hedgehogs. So I'm a little bit concerned with the assumption that, you know, this literally just is functional and ticks a box. No, we need to think much wider than that. Make the whole lot at the bottom have the ability for a hedgehog to run through, an adder to slide through. It's not obvious. Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, functionally linked land is a term that's used for parcels of land that are outside of designated sites that have some level of interaction and requirement for, such as Ramsar sites, etc., to be able to survive and function. And these pieces of land are not found to be part of that. So while ecology-wise and ecosystem-wise, every piece of land is required, but where would you stop the boundary? This is not a piece of land that is found, according to the ecology survey, which has been looked at by Essex County Council, to have in ecology terms a functional link to such a degree as they are heavily entwined.
Thought it was next to a low. Thought it was next to adjacent to a
Chairman, just because it's physically next to it doesn't mean there is a link between things such as what happens on the site, what is found on the site, etc., what vegetation, etc., will affect how much of a functional link there is. And the ecology report, which has been looked at by Essex County Council, has found that while the site may be next to it, in ecology terms, it's not functionally linked. I can't really comment any further than that. We're relying on our consultees.
I have to say, I think that's a confusing term to use, and
Which it's
I'm just saying,
yeah.
it's a confusing term to use. But I'd still like to know why we haven't asked for an environmental impact assessment, and we've relied on a screening opinion on what one of those is.
So a screening opinion is essentially the developer. So one was submitted and determined by us in October 2020. So what it is the developer provides us with a habitats regulation assessment and a shadow assessment. Then what we take from that is we screen the development against things like human health impacts, ecology impacts, archaeological, yeah, you know what I mean, and all of those elements. And then we screen it to see whether the likely significant effects would be so significant as to warrant an environmental impact assessment. And so as part of that screening, it was found that this development wasn't going to result in those likely significant effects.
That's not mentioned in the report though, is it? Would have been helpful because I wouldn't have needed to ask the question and done a little bit of extra research. That's fine. I'm still concerned about the mammal crossings and where they're going to go because I'm not sure if they can read English.
Yeah, point noted. It is a common practice. And recommended.
We used to send little boys up chimneys. Was common practice. Just because it's common practice doesn't mean say it's the right thing to be doing. And maybe we should be innovative and do something different.
All I'd say, members, to you, Chairman, is that being innovative is likely to get us costs at appeal. We have to do what is best practice. We have to do what is accepted within the system we're working within at the moment. And I'm afraid we are where we are. Thank you, Chairman.
Still have to push those boundaries. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Councillor Fluker.
Very much. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, within the report, it mentions that this scheme brings forward a community grant, which I understand is being administered by the local parish council. Can you tell me whether or not there is a national algorithm that applies to that, or whether or not we have a sum that the developer is considering? And the only reason I ask that is because this local planning authority made a terrible mistake over the first wind farm that came to the district, and I think this is one of the larger scales solar farms that's coming. So that was my first question. I've got a couple, and then Chairman, you'll be pleased to know I'm also hoping to move this forward. So is there
I'm not aware, but this is something that falls outside of the application. So it's something that the developer is, if you're referring to the community fund to the parish, that's something outside of the application and isn't a material consideration for this.
Okay, so yeah, I get that, but it is mentioned in there. So I hope they're as generous to reflect the income from this site, which will be
Councillor
substantial.
Fleming would want to come in.
Well, if she wants to call for a point of clarity, then I'll give way, but otherwise no. So
it is a point of clarity. Councillor Fluker. Yes, I had my hand up to let members know that they all will have received a presentation from Your Shout, which presumably is one of the promoters, on Monday, which had a PowerPoint presentation that mentioned the Community Benefit Fund secured by legal agreement with the Parish Council. Actually, Councillor Morgan and I were at the Parish Council last night. They had only received the letter the day before, so had not had time to consider it amongst their councillors. So that, my understanding is that that has not been secured with the Parish Council. They haven't met to decide. Just so members are aware. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm grateful for that, and I also take those comments in relation to what the officer guided us with as well. So I just wanted to turn to screening now, because it's not unusual for these developments to have a condition that says something like that the screening will be maintained at 2.5 metres within 5 years, because what will happen, and I'm sure, I mean, this applicant is not going to go to King & Co and buy specimen trees of 2 metres high. It's just far too expensive. So they'll probably go down the other route of putting, that no pun meant, they'll go down the other route of buying whips or whatever. So I think that I'd be interested to know if members support it, that it would be good to have a condition like that. Can we just turn to the view of Bradwell Power Station, please? There we go. So there we have it. So that is 3B agricultural land. So I think anybody that knows what 3B is, it means it facilitates the growing of cereals. So when we look at this and the loss of agricultural land, Chairman, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we have a straightforward choice here. We either eat in the dark or starve in the light, don't we? Just to accentuate it. I couldn't resist putting it in there. And Chairman, whilst I have your attention, I'm absolutely delighted that the applicant didn't talk about sheep, because there are some members here, I'm sure, that won the trip years ago when we went to have a look at one of these solar farms, and the sheep were all there, and it's clear they hadn't wandered very far away from the gate, because there was no sheep poo anywhere. And if I remember rightly, we actually saw the sheep go past us in the cattle truck after we'd done our visit. So, look, you know, and I think if anybody's driven down the M4, you'll see exactly what the ground looks like under these afterwards, Chairman. But, you know, the crux of this is, I hear all the comments and concerns by members, but at the end of the day, we've got the professional opinions of people on ecology, and we have to live by them. So, Chairman, there's two big things with this as far as I'm concerned, and that is the Conservation Officer supports this application, and the party pooper in these is actually Natural England, who actually assess the site in relation to the loss of agricultural land, and they don't have any objections to this scheme. So, Chairman, I would propose that we agree the recommendations that the officers have made to approve this application, but subject to a more robust condition on archaeology, which I think my friend to the right, are you a friend or a friendly? I can't remember at the moment. My friend to the right, I think, is busy writing. And the other one, Chairman, is that, and for once I'm going to seek the advice of officers, because clearly I don't know everything, but whether or not we can put this condition in so that we have a 2.5 metre hedgerow within 5 years, Chairman. And Chairman, that's my proposal. I don't know if anyone would second that.
Do, Chairman. I'm quite sure Councillor Fluke has fully read the report, but condition 4 requires landscaping to be agreed, and that if any of it fails within 5 years to be replaced. So that would cover that matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, it doesn't speak, with the greatest respect, and thank you for letting me coming back, but that's not what it says. I mean, if they plant some 18-inch whips and then they die, then the following autumn at the right time they replace them. You know, we've seen this on developments throughout the district, and I know particularly in my own ward, Southminster and Burnham, and you've got this perpetual rollover. So, Chairman, that's why I'm saying that within 5 years they should be able to get screening there at 2.5 metres. Thank you.
For you, Chairman, the vegetation on site is to be matured by the 15th year. So it might be quite onerous for us to impose a condition requiring it to be at full height by the 5th year. Obviously, we have got the protection in there that the vegetation will be replaced if it dies, but it might not be a reasonable condition to ask for it to be at its full maturity by the 5th year.
So, but that seems to me, Chairman, it's 15 years. So for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it could be completely devoid of any type of screening at all. So I sort of don't see that as being an acceptable condition as it stands. And you may not like it, but people will see this development, and I think we should screen it. And I think this local planning authority should do absolutely everything possible to protect the amenity of people that are nearby. And I don't think, the way my hedges grow at home, I don't think it will be, if you put in a conservation mix hedging, which hopefully will be local hedges, then in no time at all, if you plant them a metre high, they'll be up to 2.5 metres. And, I don't think it's an unreasonable condition. And of course, if the applicant thinks it's unreasonable, then I'm sure they'll come back to the table.
Yeah, it's obviously within members' gift if they wish to impose a condition. But yeah, as officers, our opinion is that it might be unreasonable.
I listened to your concerns and cautions on it, but I think it's important because we've got to look going ahead with these as well. So, Chairman, I've made my proposal. It's been seconded, and now I think Councillor Nunn, hopefully is going to come up with archaeology.
Councillor Thompson first.
Apologies, Chairman. I thought Councillor was gearing up to speak, but on his archaeology.
Just on the archaeological condition.
I'm happy to give way. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I don't think we should be presumptuous enough to suggest the methodology. So I'm not suggesting that it's a resistivity survey or that's not the condition I was proposing. I was saying that the archaeological condition goes beyond a desktop exercise because it needs to include on-site assessment and field work and a watching brief.
Dave, that's Councillor Nunn's proposal. I'll second that, but it seems pretty normal, that to me.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been slightly overtaken by events and subsequent discussion, but I was going to say these panels are meant to absorb the energy from the sun, not reflect it, so reflection tends not to be a problem. Otherwise they wouldn't work, they wouldn't do anything. And also a plea, unusually for me, the fact that this land is not going to be farmed and not going to be combined routinely every year actually will save thousands upon thousands of small furry animals' lives, as it happens. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. Regarding the trees, would it not be more sensible to suggest a girth width that's more usual for tree planting? And I think with the size of this development, I don't think that we should go for whips. I think we should be looking for something more medium size with an 18 to 20 centimetre circumference. And these, because they're more mature trees, they're more likely to survive, and they'll give more of an immediate screen. And I don't think this is unreasonable for the development it is and for the income it will bring. I think this is a very small price for the applicants to pay. And it would make me a lot happier with the application if it was well screened.
Through you, Chairman. So the landscaping condition will require the details to be agreed. We're not at the detailed stage as yet.
Yes, Councillor.
I've been waiting for ages.
Councillor Hull.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Second question. My concern is there is a bike track on the area, isn't there? A very well used bike track.
Yeah, it's a motorbike track.
It is a motorbike track because we've actually ridden around there quite a lot.
It's definitely a motorbike track.
Yeah, and it's used a lot by the local youths. And perhaps, have you thought about where they would put them? Where you'd put something for them next time? Because
You can actually see it on Google Earth really clearly.
So I think you're referring to the bare soil area to the north of the site that has.
But that is a very well used bike track, and the youth and for for people's health and everything. I think they should have something like that in the area, because there'd be a lot more buildings, a lot more children, and if we don't want them to throw bricks at the place, it might be a good idea to get them to use their energy up. Have you thought about where they could then re-put their bike tracks?
I'm not aware that it's a formal use of the site that would be a consideration for the planning application, a use of the land. So it wouldn't be something that we could consider as part of this application.
But it's something that is very well used and seem to be needed in the area, because there aren't many at all.
It wouldn't be for the developer to provide off-site provision for something that isn't a sort of designated.
But the council could perhaps think about somewhere for them.
Yeah, I think that falls outside of the scope of this application.
I'm just.
Are we done, members? Okay, we have a proposal from Councillor Nunn. An amendment, second by Councillor Helm. Can we remind?
Through you, Chairman. Look, I think, obviously Councillor Nunn's raised an issue around archaeology, and I think we can amend the existing conditions to accommodate the request if members are happy with that. And Councillor Fluke has asked for probably an amendment to the existing landscaping condition to be a bit clearer on what our requirements would be for the details to be submitted. And if members are happy with that.
So Lee, as long as you and I are clear what members want, because I think the members
like
want
to
2.5
highlight,
meetings.
you're the only member mentioning
It's
which.
lovely to see you
Great,
smile
yeah.
again at a planning meeting.
Right, shall we move for a motion on that? Raise your hands. It's agreed. Yeah. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Yeah, I'm abstaining. Yeah. So that's passed. Okay, yes, thank you. So that's... No. Yes.
Item 6. Item 6. Any other business?
Any other business that the chairman decides are urgent? There's none. Yeah. I'll close this meeting.